Hello Poetry Pals, welcome back to another video. This week we are focusing again on how to get published and focusing specifically on how to submit your poems. I'm largely going to be speaking in the context of submitting your poems to journals and magazines for publication, but this also applies to poetry competitions and other things like that. So without further ado, let's get into it. So hopefully by now you have made a start on your submission spreadsheet and you have picked out a few magazines that you think would be good for your poems. Maybe you've had a read of them, maybe you know of the people who've already been included in those magazines and you think that that is the place for you to go. So next what you want to do is do a bit further research into those magazines, and here are the main things that you want to know. You want to know dates. Do they have set submission periods? A lot of magazines will only accept submissions between certain dates, and outside of those dates, they will ignore you or they'll chuck it out. The main reason magazines do this is to keep a manageable workload. Some magazines accept it all year round, but they will sometimes take a lot longer to get back to you. So just bear in mind whether they have specific submission dates. If they do, stick them in your calendar for when the next one is open so you can go and submit. So the next thing you want to research is how they are accepting submissions. Are they using SubmitABall, which I'll tell you more about in a bit? Are they accepting submissions via email or in the post? Each magazine will have a very specific way that they want you to submit, and you have to do it that way. Don't just think that all magazines are the same and just send off an email to editor@themagazineIwanttogetpublished@.co.uk, because it will show that you haven't paid attention. So doing your research and submitting them the way that they want it submitted is really important, because it shows that you've done your research and you really care about how your work is being viewed. And finally, the last thing you've got to double check is layout and how they want you to lay it out. Some people want it all in one Word document. They'll want up to 5 poems in one Word document. Some places will want each poem in a separate Word document, and so on and so forth. I don't know if my fridge is being too loud here, but we're just going to go with it. No, that's the boiler. Shut up. Anyway. So yeah, some people want it in separate Word documents. There is one, I can't remember which one, that wants your poems in the body of the email, which I don't trust, but whatever. They might also have a very specific font and size and margin and stuff like that. So you've got to pay attention to that. One of the things that I use my submission spreadsheet for is noting down the layouts that each magazine wants them in. So yeah, those are the main things. You want to check dates, you want to check submission method, and you want to check layout. How do they want it? So now we're going to run through exactly the different types of submission layout and what exactly that means and how to go about submitting through these methods. First of all, we've got SubmitABall. SubmitABall is a website which you create a login for, and it is basically a huge submitting database network thing. Yeah, that is the most eloquent way I can describe it. Okay, so I'm going to take you over to SubmitABall now. I have it as a shortcut on my Google Chrome, but as you can see, it's just submitaball.com with 2 T's. And you will need to sign in. Okay, so once you've created a login and you sign in, it looks like this. And you can follow certain magazines so that you get notifications when their submissions are open. It will just show you the dashboard of loads of things that are ending at the moment. It's worth saying that these are these magazines are of various sizes from all around the world. So just randomly submitting to things that you find on SubmitABall might not be like the best thing to do, because you might end up submitting to something really obscure and then they have the exclusive rights to publish your poem when actually it could have found its home somewhere better for you. So as you're looking through, just bear that in mind. The other thing to see is you can, there's prices, and that is basically, a lot of places will charge you to submit, and my advice is, and you don't have to listen to me on this one, but my thing is that even if you can afford to pay to submit your poems to a magazine for publication, that doesn't mean that other people can afford it. And therefore, magazines and journals that choose to charge poets to submit their poems to them, I think are being slightly discriminating against working class poets or people who cannot afford to do that because they have other financial priorities. So that is what I would argue with that. And just because you can afford it, by giving them your money, you're supporting that practice, so I would argue that you shouldn't anyway. I really hope that doesn't get me in trouble. Obviously, there are really big poetry competitions out there that do charge money, and for that I think that is slightly different because a lot of the competitions have a prize money and a lot of that money comes from people entering. So with competitions I think it's a different ball game, but when we're just talking about getting your poems published in a magazine and they're charging you for it, I don't think that's right. So do you, but have a think about that. Okay, so let's explore this a little bit more. We've got the following. So if I click on following, this will show me the people that I am following on SubmitABall, and it turns out that there are 5 ones that I'm currently following, which is Granta magazine, which is huge, Into the Void, which I think is international. We've got Poetry Wales, we've got the Rialto, and we've got the Stinging Fly. All of these are included on my spreadsheet. We've got Granta here, has got all of their submission guidelines on their page, which is really useful. They've got the frequently asked questions. This is a great example. How soon can I expect to hear about my submission? We aim to respond to all submissions within 6 months. It is worth saying that 6 months is one of the longest ones. Most of them commit to 3 months, but Granta doesn't. Like, in a way, Granta is huge, so maybe they can get away with it, but also like 6 months with my poem, come on, please. Yeah, so they're charging people to submit fiction and non-fiction, but from Friday the 7th, they've got their poetry thing. Let's have a look. So yeah, Granta is open and it closes on Friday the 7th, so I've saved that to remind me to go and do it. So those are the ones that I have followed because I found them on my poetry spreadsheet. I've been researching them online. I know that those are the magazines that I would like to submit my work to, even if they do take 6 months to get back to you, which is ridiculous. So then you've got your saved ones, which I just saved this one too. So you save the submissions, you follow the magazines. So you follow the magazines and the organisations that are asking you to submit. You save the particular deadlines and whatever that you want to meet. Then we've got Discover on this top tab. Discover is just the dashboard that it takes you into the beginning, and you can filter it. So I would always filter it by not having a fee, and maybe filter it by deadlines. And then there's tags here, and I would obviously click poetry. So these are all of the ones that would I could submit to. This is across the whole of SubmitABall, so that is something to bear in mind, but these are all of them here. So now you know. So next up, I'm going to go and have a look at my submissions dashboard, which is, as you can see, written here. I have 2 declined and 2 received, but in reality it's 3 declined. There was a Seren Christmas Poetry Competition 2018, which I submitted a poem to, and they haven't declined it yet, but I think it's fair to say that I did not win the 2018 Christmas competition. We've got the active ones, so those are the ones that are still going. We've got the accepted ones, of which there are none, and we've got the declined ones there. So there you have it. The great thing about SubmitABall is that you can withdraw individual poems, you can do all sorts with it, which is really great. So like say I went to my submission here, which is called Portrait of a Father from Memory. You can see that I've got my cover letter there, and they replied saying we've received it, thank you. So from that you can download your submission, and you can also withdraw your submission. This is in case any places receive simultaneous submissions, of which none do, it's a lie. So you can keep a track of it, and you can withdraw your submission if that's what you want to do. If you did just want to, you could message them and say, hi, I would like to withdraw just this poem from your consideration, and that works too. So that's SubmitABall. Definitely worth getting a login for, definitely worth going and having an explore, and if you do find any magazines that I'm not currently following, by all means let me know, definitely want to hear from that. But I think SubmitABall is one of the best intuitive ways of submitting your poetry. So next you've got emails. An email, you would do the cover letter, and I'm going to explain a bit more about what a cover letter is in a bit. But generally with an email you would have the cover letter in the body of the email, and then your poems either in one document or separate documents attached to the email. For God's sake, whatever you do, make sure you actually attach them before you send. That's so embarrassing, but I've done it before and it makes you look like a right knobhead. Emails can sometimes feel a lot more casual, and it's very important to bear in mind that they aren't, and you should still treat it. I treat it as the same level of formality as you would get with applying for a job. I would argue that most places receive submissions via email. So the final one, and I would argue the rarest way of submitting poetry, is via post. There are some places that still only accept postal entries. Included in that is the Poetry Review, which is full on goals for me, and Stand, which is a place that I recently got accepted in. One of the reasons I think that magazines will only accept postal submissions is because I think part of it is to test that poets are committed to doing it. I don't think it is necessarily that they haven't moved with the times. I just think that they are actually testing how much you care about it. It's like when you're applying for a job interview and the job application form is 7 pages long and it takes you a full day to fill out. Partly they're doing it because it's got to be that a part of it is they're testing to see whether you are committed to the job enough to fill the application form out. The thing to bear in mind with postal submissions is to make sure that you've paid enough postage for it. If you're sending in several pages of poetry, you've got to be careful that you're not going over a weight limit, because it might go up to a large envelope, so you need to be careful of that. The other thing to bear in mind is Okay, when you send a Word document, I tend to name the Word document Josie Alford, magazine name, submission. And that means whenever they're reading that Word document, even though my name isn't on every single page, it's on the Word document, so they know Josie Alford is the name that they need to look up to tell me that they've rejected my poetry. In the post, pieces of paper can often fall apart. Do not paperclip or staple your things together, keep it loose, but use a header or a footer to input your name and your contact details, so that, because what I imagine happens is they'll get a bit of paper, they'll read through this poem, they'll read through this poem, and they'll like this one, so that'll go on the accept pile, but they won't like the rest of them, so that'll go on the reject pile. And so they need to have this to be able to tell the person, yes, we've accepted this poem from you. So make sure that your contact details are on each thing, and they often ask for a paid for envelope so that they can respond to you. And it's worth mentioning that you don't have to unless you want the copies of your poems back, so you'd have to provide them with a prepaid envelope so they can send your stuff back to you. But in my experience, most people just respond to you via email, so make sure you include your email address in your cover letter as well as on your headers and footers for the poems. Next, I want to talk to you about sequencing and layout. So this was another thing that you needed to research, was what font do they want you to use, what size do they want you to use it in, and if they have been specific and they have mentioned it, then you do what you're told. So if they've said, hey, we'd really like you to use Times New Roman 12 font, you do that. No matter how much you're a Georgia ride or die gal, you've got to do what they tell you, because that's how they want to receive your poems. If they don't specify, then you can lay out your poems in terms of font and size however you want. But it is worth saying that you want to use still some conventional fonts. You don't want to be standing out for the wrong reasons, so make sure that you're using a font that you genuinely would like your poems published in. And by that I mean no stylistic out there fonts, nothing like Comic Sans. My advice generally is to keep it serif or keep it clear and easy to read at the very least. If you're a sans serif person, fine, but I think you're wrong, and you should definitely start using serif when submitting your poems, because that's how I feel. The other thing to consider as well, especially I know a lot of the people who watch this are spoken word artists, really think about how your poem is going to be laid out on the page. Are you going to be using your form in an interesting way to portray your poems? If so, make sure you actually do that in the copy that you send to them. The way you lay out your poem on the page is really, really important, and you should treat your poem with the respect that you want other people to. So you've got to bear in mind that however you send your poems to them, that's how they will lay it out. So make sure that you have laid it out exactly how you want it. Make sure the line breaks are right. Make sure if you want it right aligned, make sure it is right aligned on the document that you send. Then we've got to think about sequencing. So some places will only want you to submit one poem. Some places will allow you to submit up to a number. I think the most is sort of 6-ish. So you sort of you bring together 6 of your best poems to submit. And the one thing that you really got to think about, if you've watched any of my poetry reviews, I think sequencing is very important, because that is the journey that the reader goes on when they experience your poetry. Most people will read your collection in order, so therefore you need to really think about how you're going to, how you want them to encounter your poetry and the order of that. So you go through your submission spreadsheet, you look at the ones that you are ready to submit, and you're like, okay, I want this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then what you should do is have a good long think about the order in which you want the editor to encounter your poems. You might not have an opinion on it, but maybe like think about the journey through it, just because it does make a difference, and I think it is something worth spending 5 minutes looking at. So think about sequencing, think about your layout. So the next step I'm going to talk about is the cover letter. A cover letter acts like exactly what you sounded like, same with a job application. It's a way of introducing yourself to the editor. And there are certain ways that you can make sure that your cover letter just meets the requirements of what it needs to be. If you're printing it out, make sure that you're laying it out like a letter with your address and stuff like that on it. With emails, you don't have to include your address necessarily at the top right, but bear in mind. Okay, so with the dear, you want your email to be dear, first name, second name. You do not want it to be dear Mr. or Mrs. surname. You want it to just be dear first name, dear second name. Why? I don't know, that's just what my lecturer told me. I kind of like it though, because I think using titles such as Mr. and Mrs. is weirdly gendering. We don't need to do that. Let's just use their names. So you can have dear Emily Berry, who is the editor at Poetry Review. So you feel like, dear Emily Berry, that's how you start. So the next bit would be, I would be grateful if you could include the attached or following, depending on how you're submitting it, poems for inclusion in an upcoming issue of insert magazine name here. So that's how you would do it. With Magma, they obviously have themed ones, so you wouldn't just say an upcoming edition, you would say in the lost issue of Magma. So then you've got that. Then you've got your poetry CV. You would include any poetic achievements that you have had, including anywhere that you have been published. And that's it. In the cover letter, you talk about yourself in the first person, unless they specify you not to. So mine says, I'm a Bristol-based poet, part of Hammer and Tongue Bristol, and I run events. I have won the following slams, and I have had poems accepted in Stand magazine, and Obsessed with Pipework, and the MA Creative Writing Anthology, and something else. Spoken word poets, talking about slams that you have won is good, but it's also worth, it's also worth bearing in mind that a lot of page poets won't care, and a lot of the editors will be page poets. But if you're maybe struggling to fluff that up, then yeah, talk about any slams or achievements that you've had in the spoken word world. But talking about your page roles is definitely more important. So you've done that bit, and then you'll be like, thank you for considering these poems. I look forward to hearing from you. Kind regards, best way. Oh no, yours sincerely. That's what we want. Yours sincerely, Josie Alford. And that is how you write a cover letter. Okay, so you've got your cover letter, you've got your sequencing and your layout, both based on how the magazine has asked you to submit your poems. You are ready to go. You've got it uploaded to SubmitABall, you've got it attached to your email address, you've got it ready to print out. Check it over. Check it over one more time, have a read through. Are you missing a word from your poem? Plot twist, I actually submitted a poem with a word missing. If you're not so great at proofreading, get someone else to proofread it for you, and once you've done that, then you can press send. Then you can stick a stamp on it and send it in the post, and it's all done. Then you've got one final thing to do. Update your poetry submission spreadsheet with where you sent it and when. So if you are new to this channel and you don't know what I'm talking about with my submission spreadsheet, go check out my last video, how to get published submission spreadsheets, and have a watch of that. Then what you might also want to do is stick a little event in your calendar for 3 months' time or however long it is, just to say, should have heard back from this magazine by then. And if you haven't, maybe you're justified to chase it. And if you have heard back by then, well, it's all sorted. Then all you can do is wait. Make yourself a cup of tea, go about your life for 3 months and wait. Do not contact them before the end of their time. So if they said, we aim to get back to you within 6 months, don't send an email after 2 months being like, hey, I haven't heard from you, is my post there yet? Because guess what, it's not going to endear you to them. They're not going to like you more for doing that, so bear that one in mind. I hope you found that useful on how to submit. If there are any questions that I've missed on this subject that you think I need to talk about, stick them in the comments, because before I finish this How to Get Published series of videos, I'm definitely going to do like a Q&A roundup of anything that I've missed, so please make sure that you comment those down below. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you're subscribed to my channel and like this video, and do all the YouTube things. Please, if you found this useful, share it with your friends on Twitter and Facebook. All of my social media links are down below, so please make sure you're following all of those. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Please subscribe for next week's video. I'm actually running a workshop at a writer's retreat, and I'm going to be vlogging about that experience for you. Please subscribe. Love you loads. Bye!